All right, we are at the top of the hour, so let's begin. There are going to still be a few extra people joining us here, so let me do some housekeeping before we get into this session. For those of you who are new to this series, we do this every month. This is the ACT training webinar series. We cover a different topic every month on the last Wednesday of each month. Today's topic is going to be all about data management and managing security around your data. If you have questions throughout this session, just use the Q&A panel inside Zoom. And I've got Dan Horn on the line. He's going to help me answer some questions. And some of the most common questions that we get are these. Is this being recorded? And the answer is yes, this is being recorded. We'll send a link to you at your email address that you used when you registered for this session. We'll send you a link there so that you can access it later. Also, I'm going to share a website with you a little bit later on where you can see all of our previous sessions here. This is the 8th session that we've covered here in the ACT training webinar series. So you'll have access to all 8 of them. I'll give you a link later on how to see that. So yes, it is being recorded. Also, you can follow along with me if you want with the things that I'm doing. Don't worry if you fall behind a little bit though, because you can always go back to that recording and see it later on. At the end, after this session is over, we're going to send you a survey just to get some feedback on if you liked it or if you didn't like it. Also, if you have any ideas for future sessions that you'd like to see, we'd like to have that feedback so that we know if we're on the right track or if there's really something that we've been missing that you'd like to know more about. And again, I'll show you a link later where you can see the previous sessions that we've already visited. So maybe you have an idea of something you'd like to see, but we've probably already covered it. I don't know. So I'll show you that website at the end. So let's begin with this session here. We're going to talk about data management and security. Our agenda shows a few things that I want to show you here. User roles, we're going to talk about what the roles are in ACT, how you can adjust a la carte permission settings. And then how about passwords? Do you want to set up a complex password system? I'll show you how to do that with the user password policy. And Teams, there's a feature that a lot of you aren't using is Teams. If you have multiple people at your company who use ACT, maybe it's a good idea to set up Teams so that you can manage restrictions on contact records or even permit or security type things. We can set up Teams to do that. And I'll show you how to get to that area too. Some fields maybe in your ACT database, you want to set up security on them. You don't want everybody to see the data in specific fields. I'll show you field level security, how to set that up. And then you can also go to the Access tab for individual records, whether it's contact records or opportunity records. And you can even set security on those specific records individually. Then towards the end, we'll talk about managing data, having data integrity. I'll show you how to do check for duplicate records, whether it's contact records or company records, and how to fix it if you find duplicates. And then at the very end, I'll show you how to remove old data. Some of you have databases going back 20 years or more. And maybe you've noticed that your performance in ACT is getting kind of sluggish. Well, we can fix that in a lot of cases by removing that old data that you're just never going to need again. So I'll show you how to do that too. There's a live chat-based Q&A. We'll go over questions towards the end. Dan's going to be answering them throughout. So again, use the Q&A panel inside Zoom. Try to keep your questions pertinent to this session. Otherwise, it might not even get addressed. So we have that for you. Okay, so let's begin. Tell you a little bit about me. My name is Brent Milner. I'm the North American trainer here for ACT. I was born in Arizona. I grew up here. I'm still here. I've been working for ACT for over 17 years. My job at the company is to train everybody, train new employees, train customers, train partners, just all about educating everybody about ACT to the best of my ability. I live in northern Arizona in the woods. We have over 130 inches of snow this year, so it's been a rough winter, but I'm okay. So let's start here. Let's talk about our first topic, user roles and permissions. Now, I'm going to show you how to access and change user roles. When you use ACT, it comes packaged with a lot of different roles for each of your different users. So you might have one user who's your admin. You might have a user who's a manager. You could have standard users. You might even have a system manager who doesn't really interact with the data, but helps you manage your database. So we have all these different roles that are available. And I just want to show you where that's located. And then I'm going to explain what these different roles are. So I'm going to go into my ACT desktop account here and just show you how to access this area. You go to your tools menu. And from here, you're going to choose manage users. This opens up a little window, manage users window. And what you're going to do is locate one of your users that you want to change their roles for. So on this screen, it's going to show you their security role. Let me widen that column a little bit. So I have one user who's an administrator, a lot of standard users. I have a manager user. You can see in that column what they are. But if I select one of my users and click edit user information, we'll see their name. And then here's their security role dropdown where I can now change their role to different things. I'll explain some of these. So administrator, this is really the highest level role in ACT. So if you have this role, you can access all features, all records that have either a public or limited access. Admin users are responsible for maintaining the database, ensuring data security. They can add and delete users. All of those types of people should be an administrator. And I really just recommend having one administrator per database, because if you have more than one, you're going to run into a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So the administrator should be somebody you trust with all of your data completely. Your manager role, they have access to all the features except managing users, deleting a database, and managing a password policy. The manager role can be expanded. You can add or remove permissions for the individual user, and I'll show you how to do that. Managers have access to all public records. Managers can manage teams. They can modify the database schema, meaning they can create fields, edit fields. They can even manage records that are owned by other users. Managers can create and edit the layouts that you see in ACT. They can import and export data. They can manage custom activity types. They can update your product table. So any of your products in your opportunities area, they can update that. All of these things are under the manager role. So you can have several managers. That's fine. Standard is just your typical user. They access most areas of ACT. You can also expand and add permissions or remove permissions from a standard user. Standard users can access all public records, of course, and then their own private records. I'll talk about public and private records here in a little bit too. So your standard user, they perform a variety of tasks like creating report templates, modifying reports, but they don't need to be able to modify or maintain the database. So that's what a standard user should be. Now there's restricted also here. Restricted, they can access basic functionality in ACT. They can see public records, they can see their own private records, but they can't delete any records, even the ones they own. So typically a restricted user, they're an assistant and somebody who's on maybe an hourly clock. Someone who just requires only limited access to features. And then your browse user, this is really a read-only user. They can run reports, but they only can read any information. They can't edit any of the data inside ACT. A browse user might be a temporary employee or somebody who only needs to reference information. They're not really making any edits to your database. And then, of course, I mentioned the system manager earlier. This is somebody who carries out the administrative tasks such as database maintenance, user and team management, scheduler setup, and website administration. If you want to see these permissions for yourself and what they mean, you can do that from within ACT. If you go to the help area, you can hit F1 on your keyboard if you're in the desktop version of ACT and launch this little help window. From here, if you click index at the bottom, and then in the top little search window, if you just type user, you'll see this user defined fields area. What I'm looking for, though, is user roles. If you click user roles, then from here, you want to expand this summary of the security roles arrow, and that'll tell you what each of those permissions does, or each of those roles does. So yeah, just use the help area to find that. So how do I change specific permissions for a user? Well, this is easy too. Again, I shouldn't have closed my window, but I did. Let's go back into manage users here. And what I'm going to do is change one specific permission for one of my users. So let's choose Eric, and I'm going to edit his user information. And I can either click the next button to go to it, or I can click add permissions. Either way will get me there. You want to get to this screen that says add permissions. Now what this does is it's going to show all of the a la carte permissions that are available in ACT. So he already has, as a standard user, these specific permissions, but I can add additional ones to him. So maybe I want him to have his own remote database. I could choose the remote administration and slide it over there so that he can manage his own remote database. Or maybe I want to add some ACT marketing automation permissions for his account. You can see all these different AMA permission settings. Choose those and move them over to his account to make sure he can see those. One of the most important permissions is this web API access. You're going to need that if you want them to be able to see anything that pulls a web page inside ACT. And so for more information on these permissions, I can show you how to learn more about that too. But basically, the permissions are set up so that you can add each of these individual items so that they can do these tasks without having to change their user role. I don't know why I keep closing this window. My brain isn't working correct today. Let me go back here and show you these permissions one more time, just to explain what a few of them do. So accounting link tasks. This lets you install and use an accounting back office link. This applies if you're using back office applications that are linked through installing a supported application like that. Delete records is pretty standard. This lets you delete companies, contacts, groups, activities, series, histories, opportunities, notes, secondary contacts. Make sure that any users who have that delete record permission, that you trust them, of course, because that's a weighty permission. Once you delete a record in ACT, it's gone forever. And to restore it, you have to go to a backup of your database. So don't give that permission out to everybody. Exporting to Excel, that's another permission that's fairly useful. You can export your lists to Excel, contact lists, opportunity lists, and things like that. There's one called handheld device sync. Some of these permissions are kind of old. They don't really apply too much anymore. But that's what this one does. It lets you synchronize with handheld devices. And I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about for those permissions. Again, I'll go to the help area and show you where you can find more detail about these individual permissions. On the same help screen that I showed you earlier, there's a little link here to see the permissions. When you expand that as a table, it shows you each of the permissions that I talked about and what they mean. Now, if you're in ACT Premium Cloud, let me log into my account real quick, and I'll show you how you can access these permissions from here too. I'm going to log in here, launch ACT, and while that's loading, I'll go back into my PowerPoint and we'll introduce the next section, which is user password policy. So the password policy is there so that you can create a password rule to help increase the security of your passwords. So you can do some things like requiring users to not reuse. They can't reuse past passwords. So you can set up the number of passwords, the threshold for that. You can choose how frequently they need to change their passwords. You can choose how many characters minimum a password should be. You can even limit how often they can change their password. Maybe you don't want them changing it every day or every 2 days. So you can set a minimum threshold for that. And then you can even create the types of character groups that they must use, lowercase, uppercase, and so on. And so that's what this password policy thing is available to do. So how do we access these things? Well, first of all, let me show you how to access the user roles area if you're on Act Premium Cloud. If you're on Cloud, what you'll need to do is go to your tools area. And again, you're going to click Manage Users. You're going to see a little bit of a different screen than if you were on the desktop. So what you'll do here is you'll choose a user. And we're going to click, we're going to click Additional Settings at the top. This launches a new tab in your browser window, and it's going to give you a list of your databases. So you choose, if you only have one database, it'll be there. If you have multiple, choose the database you want to use. And now we're going to click Change User Roles. This will show you all the users in your system. They'll more than likely show email addresses here and not just names like I have, but you'll choose your user, change their role here, and click Update Roles. So that's where you're going to see that if you're in the cloud area. Now for permissions, permissions can be changed, individual permissions in the cloud area, the same way that we change them in the desktop area. Let me go back to this screen here, and we'll go to Manage Users. And again, we'll choose the user, we'll edit their information, and then there's an Add Permissions link. So same in desktop and cloud to add permissions, individual permissions to a specific user. Password policy. This is an admin-only task. Like I mentioned earlier, only admins can do this. In the desktop area, the way to access this is to go to your tools menu once more, and there should be just a password policy option here in the tools menu. When you click that, it's going to open the window that I showed you in my PowerPoint. And so you can just change these settings and click OK, and then that password policy will apply to everybody in your system on this database. And it says in the instructions, if you put a 0 in any of these, it means that this policy isn't required. So right now I don't have any password security on this database. If you're in cloud, it could be one of two things. If you're using single sign-on, you'll see a message like this that says, hey, your passwords are being managed by your single sign-on. And so here's a link where you can adjust that. If you're not using single sign-on, then you'll get the same screen for your password management. All right, next up on our list here is going to be Teams. So you can use Teams if you want to grant and restrict users' ownership of records or access to records. You'll set up your teams first, and then you can say, I want these teams to have access to specific records or not. And you can create teams really on any criteria that you want. I have some examples here: region or territory, industry, could be maybe a department in your company, the type of account, whatever you want. You can create infinite number of teams, and then you can assign your Act users to one or more teams at a time. So let's look at teams and look at some examples of this. Now in my teams, I think I have teams based on region. So let's look and see what we've got here. To go to your teams, you go to your tools menu again, and you're going to choose, oops, I'm on the wrong button here. Hold on. Go to my desktop area, my tools menu, and I'm going to manage teams from here. This opens a window, and it shows me my current team. So I have 6 different teams here. These are mostly regionally based, so I have different regions in the United States, but I also created an additional team for my finance department at my company. To see who the members are of the team, you can either double click this or click Edit Team, and it'll show you all of the available users and then the users who are included on each team. So for example, some things that we might want to remember, because I'm going to do a little exercise here. Jody is a member of my finance team. So I just need to remember that, because I'm going to set some records that only the finance team can see. And I want to make sure when I log in as Jody, she can see those teams. So Jody is on finance. And then one other team that I want to look at is my USA Southeast team. And I go there and I see that Randy is a member of my USA Southeast team. Okay. So what you can do as each individual users, you can set up access levels to all of the records you create. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to log in as Randy here. So let me close this window. And I'm going to log in as Randy. To switch users, I'm going to open this database. And I'll just log in with Randy's credentials here. Once I log in as Randy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an access level for when I create my own records. We'll see what that looks like here. My virtual machine is a little bit slow today. I don't know why, but we'll get here in just a second. Oh, while that's doing that, what I can do is show you in the web version or the cloud version of ACT, you can access your Teams area by going to Tools, Manage Teams, and you'll see that same window here. So this is available in desktop version and the cloud version. If you are an admin or a manager user role, you can do this. All right, let's see if this is loaded yet or not. There we are. Okay, so I'm logged in as Randy. And so what I'm going to do, Randy's a standard user, but Randy has some records that really needs to be limited to him and just a few other people looking at. So what he's going to do is he's going to go to his Tools menu. And from here, he's going to go to the Preferences area. This will open the Preferences window. And on the Startup tab, there is a button called Record Creation Options. Now, if you're on the cloud version, it will be on the Startup tab itself. You don't have an extra button to click. But when you click this button, it's going to show this window, Record Creation Options. And this is now where you can choose to set security for your records that you create. Currently, by default, all new contacts, companies, groups, and opportunities are public. And that just means whenever I create a record, anybody else can see them. But let's say that Randy wants to change this. He wants to set it so that any new contacts he created are not viewable to everybody, but he wants to limit that access. If I set private, well, yeah, let me explain what these permissions are real quick before I continue. So public just means that the record is going to be seen by all users. This record will be displayed in every area, like reports, anytime you do mail merges with word processing documents, any lookups, searches, queries, keyword search results, any list views, even in the groups and company trees, this record will be seen if you list it as public. If you choose private, this is going to be the most restrictive setting here. Private means that other users can't view it. They can't search for this record. Even parent records like contacts, groups, companies, and opportunities can be made private. Extended data records like activities, histories, and notes, you can make those private too. If you make a history, a note, or an activity private, and it includes an attachment, then that attachment will also be private. So only a user who has access to a private record can see them in anywhere that they appear. Only the record manager will see this. An administrator can't see a private record. So just keep that in mind. When you select something as private, that record is truly private. And then the last one here is limited access. This means that the record manager can set an access control list to a contact, meaning I can choose which other users should be able to edit this record. And so that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to make any new contacts that Randy creates are going to be limited. And I want to decide who should be able to see this. So Randy has decided that when he creates new records, he wants the finance team to see it, and he wants the USA Southeast team also to see it. I could choose individual users to add to that list. I could choose teams to add to that list. But that's who he's going to choose to view any of his new records. Anybody who's on the finance team, which includes Jody, and anybody on the USA Southeast team. Okay, so I'm going to click OK to this. and OK again, and then we'll apply that change and click OK. All right, so now we have this security setting is in place. What happens when Randy creates a new contact? Okay, he'll do that. Let's create a new contact. And we'll just name this contact Ricky Steamboat. And I'll add a couple other things. He's an owner. He is in the admin department. And his phone number is 403-555. Just a few things for Ricky. That's it. I'll click save. So now we have a new contact record that Randy has created, and it should include the security settings that he's built into new contacts. We can check that real quick. If I go to this contact access tab at the bottom, we'll see that for this contact, Ricky Steamboat, Randy is the manager, and look, it's limited access, just like we've set up. So if I choose select users and teams, we'll see that it is including the finance team and the USA Southeast team. Now, because I've set this to limited, administrators automatically get edit access to a limited access group. And Randy himself is in here. So these are the members who can see and edit this record. Let's test that too. I'm going to log in as one of my other users of this database. Let's log in as Bugsy. Bugsy is not on the USA Southeast team. He's also not in the finance team. So we're going to see if Bugsy can access this record. Again, this is all available also in the cloud area. If you're in the cloud area, you go to your tools, preferences window, and click startup. And you'll see your record creation access levels here on the startup screen. So same functionality in both the desktop and in cloud. Okay, so now I'm logged in as Bugsy, and I'm just going to do a search for Ricky. When I do that, I get an error that says no records were found. So Bugsy can't even find this contact because it's limited. He doesn't have permission to see it or edit it. However, if I log in as Jody, Jody should be able to have access to this. I click on this and Jody, log in as Jody, who's on the finance team. And we should see access to this record when I log in as Jody. Sorry that my virtual machine is running a little bit slow today. Usually it's a lot faster than this. Here we go. And once this login is finished, I'm going to search here for a contact named Ricky. And I'll click OK or go. And now this search will load the Ricky Steamboat contact that I created because Jody is a member of that finance team. All right, let's look at the next thing we're going to do. I'm going to log in as myself as the administrator again here. And we'll talk about field level security. So field level security lets you specify access to individual fields in ACT. So I can choose a field in ACT and say, look, I don't want everybody to have edit permissions on this field. Maybe I only want some people to have read-only permissions on a specific field, or maybe I want to hide that data from other users, no access. And so you can set specific security on individual fields in your ACT database. The way to access this is to go to your tools menu. And from here, come on, there we go. Tools menu, there it is. Let's go to define fields. Now this is going to lock the database. Since I've logged in as several other people in my database, ACT is saying, hey, we need to let them know you're making a change to the database schema. And so you need to lock this database, which means they need to log out. And So what you do is you lock the database, and it's going to give a 3-minute countdown to lock them out of the database. After this 3 minutes, the countdown's in the lower right, it'll lock the database, and then we'll be able to access that define field screen. So when you're doing a demo like this, now you have to stall for a few minutes while that countdown occurs, but it's really a good use of protecting data. So let's say that I was logged in as Randy and adding contacts and updating records and doing things like that. I wouldn't want to just be kicked out of the database without any kind of warning. I want to give all my users a chance to make any saves that they need to do. Hey, everybody save your records, because in it's a couple of minutes, we're going to log everybody out. So I don't want you to lose any changes that you were making. And also that timer can be increased. 3 minutes, I think, is the minimum amount of time. You can increase it to 10 or 30 or whatever you want, just to give everybody enough time to finish up what they're doing before you make any changes. When you change the database like we're about to do, what we're doing is we're changing the schema. We're changing the bones of the database, the structure of it. And so if somebody's editing records during that change, you can really run into some data collision. You can corrupt the data. So that's why it's a good idea to have everybody logged out so that there are no saves being made to the database while we're changing its structure. If we go to the cloud area of ACT, while this is happening, you can also manage this here in the tools menu and go to define fields. Again, this will give you that log out warning if you have any other users who have been logged in recently. And so this is an area where you can do it too. What we're going to do is we're going to manage the security for one of our specific fields. So when you launch this define fields window, you have to decide, where is this field? Which table does it exist on? Is it on your contacts table, companies, groups, opportunities, and products? You'll choose the correct table and then find that field in the list below. And again, this is a setting that only admin user roles can do, or manager user roles. Regular standard users can't access this define fields screen. So it shouldn't even show up on there as a clickable option for them. All right, we got 20 seconds left before this database is locked, and then we'll be able to access this. What we're going to do is talk about 3 different permission levels for a field. You'll be able to give somebody full access, which just means anybody can edit that field. You'll be able to give someone read-only access, which just means they can read the field, they can see the field, but they can't make any edits to it. And then the third permission is no access. They can't even see the data in the field. They can see that that field exists, but they won't see the data in that field. So let's look at the field here. My database is now locked. I can see my list of fields. And the field I want to add permissions to or add security to is called credit limit. This is a custom field that I created. It's a currency field, setting a credit limit for each of my customers. So but I want to edit this. I want to change the security. I don't want anybody else to really be able to edit that. I don't want other people to say what my contacts' credit limits are. So we're going to add security to this. I'm going to select this field and then choose field security. This takes me to my field security screen where it shows me the field I've selected, credit limit, and the current default permissions, which is full access. That just means everybody can edit that field. But I'm going to change that. I want, by default, everybody to only have read access. And it asks me, do I want to change this for all users? The answer is yes. I want all users to have read-only access. So down below, it shows me all my users in my database, and all of them now have read-only. Nobody can edit this. But I do want some of my users to be able to edit this field. So I'm going to use my Teams tab here. And I'm going to say that my finance team should be able to edit this field. So I'm going to change their default permission by clicking Edit. And for my finance team, I'm going to change them from read-only to full access. And I'll click Apply and OK. So now we see that everybody else has read-only access, but my finance team has full access, and it's based on a team permission. But maybe I have a couple of new employees and I don't even want them to see this credit limit data at all. I'll switch to my user tab. And let's say Eric is a new employee and I don't want him to be able to see that at all until sometime later. So I'll click edit. And for Eric, I'm going to change his access level to no access and click apply and OK. Now it shows Eric with no access. And even on an individual level, you can change, say, Yvonne, maybe I want her to have full access. She's not on the finance team, but for whatever reason, I want her to have not read-only, I want her to have full access. So you can change these permissions on a team level or on an individual user level. So I have a crazy set of permissions here. Yvonne can edit this field, the finance team can edit this field, and Eric can't even see it. Once you're happy with that, you click finish and click close. Act will now unlock your database so that everybody else can log in, and it applies that security to that specific field. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in as a few other people just to see that this permission has worked. First, I'll log in as somebody who was not affected by any of those specific permissions. Bugsy, he's just a standard user, so he should have the default setting for that credit limit field, which was read-only. As this loads, what I'll do is I'll look up one of my contacts and find this custom field that I created. Let's see, I think the contact I'm going to use, his name is Ryan. So I'll do a quick search on Ryan. And I'm interested in Ryan Wheaton. There he is. I'll double click his record to go to his detail view. And now this field exists on my web contact layout premium layout. That's where I added the field. So I want to go to my account info. This is a custom tab that I created. It's really ugly. Sorry about that. But you can see the credit limit field I created is here. It says 5,000. I can see it, but if I type on my keyboard, I can't change it because Bugsy only has read-only permissions. All right, let's do the same thing. And we'll log in as Yvonne because I gave her specific permissions to see it or to edit. So what I'm going to do here now is as I log in as Yvonne, I'm going to look up this record again, Ryan Wheaton, and I'm going to go to the account info tab where that field exists, create the credit limit field. And what I should see is that Yvonne can edit that field. So let's search for Ryan Wheaton. There he is. We'll go to his account info tab. And now this field, Yvonne can edit it. She'll change it to 6,000 and click save. And that save takes place. So good, that works. And the last one I want to do, of course, is log in as Eric because he has no access to this field. So I want to show you what that looks like when we log in as Eric. Yeah, we got a question in the chat that asks if we could turn off a password because you've been watching me and I've been logging in without entering a password. In my desktop version, yeah, you can set it to nothing. There may be additional password settings in the cloud version of ACT, but in the desktop version, I've set it up this way just so that I don't have to keep typing passwords because obviously you're seeing that I'm logging in lots of times and I don't want to have to type the password, making it quicker for myself. So now I'm logged in as Eric. You can see in the lower right corner who I'm logged in as. If I go to my account info tab, I can see there's a credit limit field here, but I can't see any of the data in there. So that's what that no access means. You can't see the data at all. If I went back to my define field screen, I can reset the permissions on this field so that it's back to full access for everybody. There's a reset button there. I'm not going to do that right now because I would have to lock the database again, and I don't want to wait 3 minutes for that. So just keep that in mind. I am going to log back in as myself for the next thing I want to show you. So I'll start the login procedure. And then we'll introduce the next section here, which is access tabs for records. So one of the things you can also do on each individual record is you can change the access level for a specific single record. You can set it to public, private, or limited, like we've seen before. And then we can, if you choose limited, we can change, we can assign who should have access to that based on users, teams, or both. Let's see what that looks like. Let's pick up a specific record again. I'll just choose Ryan because I've been looking at his record already. When I go to Ryan's record, maybe I've decided, hey, I want to restrict the access to this individual record. This is a record that maybe I created before I set access level to all the records I create. So retroactively, I need to go back and change the access for him. Locate the contact access tab. And here's where you can change that to be a private record or limited. If you choose private, you'll get a little warning that says, hey, when you change this, it may not restrict other users' access to notes and histories if they've been shared previously. So that's just a little thing to remember. But yeah, once you save this, only Eric will have access to this record. And then limited, again, you can choose which users and teams you want to have access to this record, this individual record. Or change it back to public, and then everybody can see it again. All right, let's start talking about our data integrity. So there is a feature inside ACT where you can check for duplicate records. You can set it up to where you're preventing any new records from any new duplicate records from being created, or you can go and retroactively scan your database to see if you have any duplicate records. And so we're going to see how to do this too. You set the criteria for what you determine qualifies as a duplicate record, and then ACT will look and make those determinations for you. So duplicate checking, again, this can be enabled or disabled by admins or manager users only. And the way to do this is to go to your tools menu and load tools menu. There you go. I'm going to go to my preferences area. And from here, I'm going to click the admin tab. And then on the admin tab, I have a duplicate checking area, which has a duplicate checking button. I'm going to click that. And we'll see by default, it's enabled, duplicate checking. You can disable it if you want. If you don't want to protect yourself against duplicate records, you can do that. Now, you can also see that duplicate checking can be enabled for 3 different record types: companies, contacts, and groups. Usually, you're not going to have a problem with groups or companies. Usually, mainly it's contacts that get duplicated. So that's a good place to start. And then all you have to do is choose the criteria, which will flag a record as a duplicate. So I usually go with contact first, but because people can have the same name, that's not good enough. I need a second level of criteria. So I usually choose contact and then email address, because it's really impossible for 2 people to have the same name and the same email address. So that, for me, that's a good way to determine we have a duplicate record. Now, this also depends on how you keep your data. If you're just entering contact names and you're not entering email addresses, then ACT may give you false flags for duplicates. So when you're entering data, if you're going to use this strategy, make sure you always have a contact name and an email address for each of your contacts. Click OK and then apply and OK, and now your duplicate checking will be enabled. And the way I'm going to test this is I'm just going to try and create a duplicate record for Ryan here. So let me copy his email address. I'm going to cheat a little bit at this. Just copy that so I don't have to type it in again. And now I'll create a new record. I'm going to type in Ryan Wheaton, spelling counts. And in his email field, put in that email address and I'll click save. And here I get my warning from ACT. it says, hey, looks like you're trying to create a duplicate record. Are you sure you want to continue? And I'll say, no, if I already have the record, I don't need to create it again. And I'll just go look up Ryan's record instead and interact with him that way. So this record hasn't been created. It still leaves the data in the field. So you might want to delete that out of there or just enter something else. And click save. And from here, then I could just delete this record. Usually I would just delete the data out of there. But I'm just going to delete this fake record here. So how would I scan for duplicate records that are already in the database? Maybe I didn't enable this, or maybe I disabled the duplicate checking, and then I created a bunch of records or imported some records, and now I'm afraid I might have some duplicates. Well, I've done that. I've intentionally created a duplicate record for one of my contacts, and let me show you who that is. His name is Will Osprey. So I'm just going to type in Will. There we are. I have two records for Will, same name, same email address, but there are some differences here because I want to show you how to combine these two without losing any data. So for example, if I look at the detail view for this first record for Will, I'll see that he has some opportunities in the past that have taken place. And he also has, I believe, some history. Yeah, he's got a lot of history going back a few years. Okay. There's a difference between him and the second Will, even though it's the same person. One of those differences, the address to field. So in my first Will, there's no address to. If I switch to my second record for Will, there is data here in this address to field. And I think I also created an activity for him and even a note. So I have a problem. I want to combine both of these records, but I don't want to lose any data from either record. And so I want to make sure when I combine them, I save all that data. But for the sake of this scenario, I'm totally oblivious that I even have duplicate records. So I need to check my database for duplicates when I don't know that they exist. The way to do this is to go to your Tools menu, and we're going to choose Scan for Duplicates, which is right here. And now I have to decide what determines a duplicate record, what means we have a match. I'm going to use my same strategy, contact first, and then their email address. When I click OK, Act does a scan, and it says, hey, we found some duplicate records. Would you like to start combining them? And that's great. I'm going to do that. I'm going to combine records. You have to know this is only going to combine 2 records at a time, though. So if you have a lot of duplicates, you may take some time to do this process for everybody. So I click Next. It's saying, who are the 2 records? You have to hold down your control button to click both. They have to both be selected here so that it knows which records to combine. We'll click Next. Now it's saying which of these records is the source and which one's the target, because we're going to copy the source to the target and then we're going to delete the source. So we have to determine which one will be which. Usually your target is going to be the one that has more data. But since in this instance, I have good data on either record, it doesn't matter which way I copy. So I'm just going to say copy contact 1 to contact 2. And down below, it shows you here's contact 1 and here's 2. So you can see in 1, there's nothing in the address to field, but in 2, there is. So I'm going to copy from 1 over to 2. Click Next. And it shows me which data I need to copy from source to the target. So for example, let's go back and say I was copying from 2 to 1. There's nothing in the 1 for this field. Here's how I would manage that. I would select this address to field and then click copy, and then it copies that over. So you'll scroll down through all these fields just to make sure that your target has all the data that your source has when you're doing this copy. And once you've done that, you can click Next. And now Act says, okay, what about additional information like any opportunity records or notes or histories or activities? Well, we saw when I looked at both of these Will contacts that one of them had histories that the other one didn't, and then that one may have had opportunities that the first one didn't. I want to make sure I copy everything from my source to my target so that I don't lose any of those records. So I'm going to check all these boxes and click Next. And then after we're all done, yes, delete the source contact record, because that's the whole point. I don't want to contact records of the same person. So I'll click next once more. It's telling me it's about to do a delete. It can't be undone. Maybe you do a database backup before you start this whole process, just in case you don't lose any data that you need. So I'll say yes to that, and I'll click finish. And now it should delete that one record of Will's. If I look at the detail view for him, I can see my address to field is here. I can see my activity is still there. My opportunities are all there. My history records are all there. And my note is there. So everything has been copied into one record, and I've just cleaned up my database. All right, the last thing I want to show you, we have a little bit of time left, is how to remove old data. So I mentioned at the start, some of you have databases that are decades old. I get that. And I'm kind of a pack rat. I never want to delete anything, because who knows, I might need to go back and reference that record from 2006 sometime. Maybe, I don't know. But I've also noticed that my database is kind of sluggish. It's slowing down because maybe I have just gigs and gigs and gigs of data in there, and it's giving me performance issues. What we can do is we can remove old data based on a specific date. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I always recommend, if you're going to do this, do a backup first. Get a backup of your database just in case you mess up, just in case sometime down the line you need to come back and find that data. From your database, go to your file menu, choose backup, and just choose database. Now you can create a backup of your database somewhere, give it a good name so that you know, hey, this is the database from this specific date at this time or whatever, and save that somewhere. Because after you do your backup, now you can delete your data and you won't have to worry about losing it forever. You can always restore that database sometime. So how do we remove old data? Again, this is in the tools menu. And we're going to look under the database maintenance submenu. And here is an option to remove old data. This opens my screen, shows me today's date, and I have to decide how far back do I want to go? What kinds of data do I want to remove? Maybe I don't care about deleting notes. Maybe I don't have a whole lot of notes, but I've noticed that my histories, I have a ton of that. I have a ton of cleared activities. And maybe that's all I care about is histories and activities. Maybe that's the bulk of my old data. Then I have to decide how far back I'm going to go. This is in days. So you might need a calculator. If you want to keep a year or two's worth of data, you might have to figure out how many days would that be. So if I decide, I don't know, 2 years is enough, maybe I'm going to say like 720 days. Is that right? 360 and 360. Yeah, 720. Check those two boxes, click OK. And then ACT is going to give you one warning just to let you know. This might take a long time if you have a lot of data. And it'll tell you, here's how many activities I'm going to delete, 1,500 and so on. Here's how many histories, 10,000. That's a lot of history. And remember, that's just stuff that's older than 2 years for me. So yeah, I click yes to proceed. I'm not going to do that now because it'll take a long time. But when you click yes, that deletion will begin, and ACT will delete everything older than what you've just said. Okay. I promised this at the start. I was going to give you a website you can look at if you want to go back and look at some of our older webinars. This is the 8th one we're doing. So there are 7 previous sessions here for you to view. Just go to act.com/explore. Super easy URL for you to remember. And you'll be taken to a screen that looks like this, where you can watch any of the previous webinars that we've done. You can also sign up, I believe, on this screen for the future ones. If you'd like to have a topic that you'd want us to talk about, we also created an email address. So you don't have to wait for that. You don't have to wait for that survey to come out. You can just email us directly, team@act.com. Just say somewhere, ACT Training Webinar Series, I want to learn about this. And that'll go to our team here, and we'll see what we can do about getting that on the schedule for the future. All right, so we have a few more minutes. We'll address any questions and answers that have not yet been resolved. In the meantime, I just want to thank you all for joining us this month. for this series, for this episode of the ACT Training webinar series. Have a great month, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month in April for our next session. Thanks again for joining us. Have a good day. Bye-bye.